All right, so if you're still with me, this is video E, or fifth video, I think, of a series on how to break up biblical reading to more effectively present it as a reader in a church or very cool party. So now, so one of the things that I'm doing here is to recap, breaking down phrases into shorter groups of words or sort of sub-phrases. And here I've got them. I've got some of them. Okay. So at the end of each line, this is the basic notion of this is at the end of each line, I've got a quarter rest, so to speak. If there's a comma, I'm going to give it a half rest. If I've got a full stop or period, depending on which language you like to use for that, I'm going to give it a full rest, so to speak. Whether you want to call it a rest. So I hope I made them clear enough. So I'll just read this. This is not actually the entire selection from the lectionary, but this is what I could fit onto the page. So, thus it was necessary for the sketches of the heavenly things to be purified with these rites, but the heavenly things themselves need better sacrifices than these. For Christ did not enter a sanctuary made by human hands, a mere copy of the true one, but he entered into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God on our behalf. Nor was it to offer himself again and again, as the high priest enters the holy place year after year with blood that is not his own, for then he would have had to suffer again and again since the foundation of the world. But as it is, he has appeared once for all at the end of the age to remove sin by the sacrifice of himself. Now I'm confronting, this may be an issue for some folks who read. I sometimes wonder whether it's like really just a serious personal problem for me. I don't know why this is not working. I thought that I could flip it. I find that when I read certain types of materials, or particularly passages of scripture, and for me, certain other books, The Lord of the Rings is one that often really gets me. I become choked up as I'm reading. There's certain turns of phrase or ideas that catch me, and I find it difficult to complete them. Okay, now this is something that if it happens spontaneously, it happens, and there's, you just have to kind of go through whatever embarrassment or sensations you experience. But if you find as you're reading a passage that it affects you like this, it does make it, it's a distraction to the people who are listening to you. It might be something where they would find sympathy with your position and be actually drawn into the text by your quavering voice or tears. It's not something that you really want to cultivate, I think, although I'm sure opinions could vary on that. But for me as a reader, if I find myself doing that consistently as I'm practicing, and how much do I practice? Let me talk about that in just a sec. But I keep reading it until I get to the point where I haven't necessarily memorized it, but I've kind of become so used to it that I've kind of played out that emotion. That sounds bad, because it's like, why am I? The reason that I'm upset about this passage is that there's a glorious beauty to what's being said here. And the love that is conveyed by what's expressed here is profound. But we want to find a way for people to come to that on their own rather than because they feel bad because Mark or whoever is crying while they're reading it, because they might not feel it the same, and then they just feel everybody feels awkward in that kind of a circumstance. You have to play it, as the reality of the situation, but I think that you can move through it. So how much do I practice when I'm a lay reader? Okay, in truth, I'm going to say that there are two points that come in here. One is, it depends on how much I'm doing. I mean, what's going on in my life. But generally, I try to spend enough time to go through the passage maybe 5 or 6 times. And when I say to go through it, I mean to read it out aloud 5 or 6 times. I'm really not trying to get to the point where I have memorized it, because then I've passed over from reading into acting, where I'm giving a kind of a speech. But I do want to get to the point where I can look up from the page and look at the audience, the congregation, the people at the cool party, and make some eye contact and sort of try to draw them in through some kind of visuals. Visuals come into it. That's another thing. But okay, so back to the page here. Sorry for that. So you can see, this is the New Revised Standard Version, in case you were wondering. And you could break it up other ways. Okay, it wouldn't have to be just this way. This is, like it's what I did. And again, what I've striven to do here is to keep each line a kind of independent unit. Okay, so now to appear in the presence of God, or now to appear in the presence of God on our behalf. That could be a single line, but for me, because I'm kind of blind or whatever, I find it much easier to take it in these smaller chunks like this. And this is pretty close to chunking for people who are familiar with that reading technique or pedagogical tool, teaching tool, where you understand language in chunks and blocks. I could make a break here, but then it starts to be a very short line or a very short phrase. It's not really a phrase, it's just, a single word. So again and again, and year after year, but as it is, he has appeared, on our behalf, now to appear. Those I've left as single lines for a variety of reasons. Okay. Now, some of these become more apparent. The more reading you do, the more of this type of division that you do, the more these parallels start to make themselves evident. But I've tried to emphasize them as I've written these lines. And I really want to emphasize to you too that I have not spent a lot of time with Hebrews, and I'm sorry for those of you who are big fans of the epistle of the Hebrews, but it's just, like I haven't spent a lot of time with it. So this is fairly cold to me. But I do spend a lot of time doing lit crit. So some of these things just kind of pop out at me as I'm looking at it. So again and again, again and again. Year after year goes with again and again. Okay. Now to appear, he has appeared. Once for all, at the end of the age, goes with year after year and again and again. So what you're trying to do is to pick out these things that are repeated phrases or repeated concepts, so that you can decide whether you want to kind of whether you think emphasizing them in some degree as you're reading it is going to be helpful for people to understand how the writer composed this piece, and how therefore you can convey it to your audience more effectively. So another thing that's useful to look for is any kind of repeated things. So heavenly things, heavenly things. Okay, but it's not just heavenly things, because it's sketches of heavenly things. And then here it's heavenly things themselves. And they need sacrifices. Okay, and then this business down here is also about sacrifices, although it doesn't use the word sacrifice. But then down here it says the sacrifice of himself. Okay, and like I said, this isn't the whole there were this sacrifice of himself is the end of this is the end of chapter 9, verse 26. So there are two more verses that are part of this passage. If somebody made you read this today, or if you were reading this for some kind of Vespers service or something like that. So it's a longish reading, but it's about on par, lengthwise. Okay, so thus it was necessary for the sketches of the heavenly things to be purified with these rites, but the heavenly things themselves need better sacrifices than these. Okay, so in this case, like when you're reading, you may have a big Bible, like the church's big show Bible. In the church that I attend, they often give you mimeographed, or boy, I'm really showing my age, aren't I? They give you a Xerox photocopied sheet with large print. Sometimes it's not quite large enough for me. And also, I want to break up the lines so that, like, I don't like that this ends with these rather than rights. As for me as the reader, I want that phrase to end with rights. So something, what I will often do, like I like to write it out myself because that helps me to memorize it, and that's a different, or to not, I shouldn't say memorize because I said earlier that I'm not trying to memorize it, but to be able to take this in more fully, I like to write it because then I'm looking at it, I'm speaking it, and my hand is working, and I'm encountering it, much more fully. For me, it's a lot fuller than doing a cut and paste from some website or whatever. But I do like to do a printed version of this, so I'll often type this out also on my word processor and then print it out. And I'm not trying to push anything on you. I don't get any kickbacks from any word processing company or print. Hewlett Packard isn't giving me any money. I'm not trying to make you spend money here by buying paper and pencils or anything like this. You have to do it, based on your own needs and your own budget. But this way of breaking it down into phrases is a lot faster to do than it's taken me to explain it. All right. So I've taken about an hour here so far to give this presentation on Hebrews, and I would have done it and been done with it by now. I mean, not, I don't mean to be dismissive when I say done with it, but I'm just saying, as I'm trying to explain the technique, it's taking longer than it takes to actually do it. So don't be saying, oh my gosh, I don't have an hour, to read this thing. I'm supposed to read it in church. Look, the more that you do this, the less time it's going to take, the more effective you're going to be each time you do it. But when you're first learning, you have to figure you're going to spend more time on it than once you become an intermediate or you know, really have some good mastery of it and start playing around and having good technique. So persevere, keep at it. I think I'll throw one more video out in this series, but I think I've hit the main points that I intended to talk about for this.